So for anyone that doesn't know Ross or I am the Mind Your Mood coordinator for the Coleraine and McGee campus. So Mind Your Mood is basically a student-led mental health initiative, and we just kind of promote positive mental well-being and try to reduce the stigma surrounding mental health. So we do this through having events and campaigns and workshops, and then as Ross was saying there, we do training as well, just on like first aid, mental health and things like that. So I'll pass over to Ross, and then Ross, you can pass on to Keith for our intro.
Yeah, couldn't really say it any better than myself. I'm the Jordanstown and Belfast campus coordinator, so I'm in between Belfast and Jordanstown. It's technically getting moved around at the minute because we're getting a new campus in Belfast, but until then we have both Jordanstown and Belfast. And yeah, I'll pass it on to Keith.
Yeah, so if anyone's not familiar with myself, I created the Endless Spiral about a year ago, just to kind of, I wasn't even originally sharing my own story. It was more just to kind of give a platform for other people to share their stories. And yeah, like, and it went from strength to strength, and like it's been a year now, and it's just been absolutely mental. I've done more in 12 months, and probably, well, as other people were doing 5 years, I've been told. So yeah, so here we are today.
I think that's the thing with podcasts as well, especially over the lockdowns and stuff. It became one of them things when people were sitting out in the gardens, and, you know, I was doing home decor for about the first 2 months. It's like I have podcasts on constantly. So they're definitely one of those things that I prefer them having them on the music, because music is a bit distracting. But like whenever you're listening to someone's story and them talk, you're like, okay, cool. So yeah, 100%. And girls, do you want to introduce yourselves? Just to round it off, because it's just a few of us.
Hi, I'm Hannah. I'm Sarah. Yeah, we're just second year students studying travel and tourism up here in Coleraine, Ulster University.
Lovely. Yeah. And Sarah and Hannah are both our ambassadors for Mind Your Mood, so they come along to most events, and they're a really great part of the team. So we'll just get started so that we can get through all the questions. So Keith, you just said there, you know, you started off your podcast and you didn't really initially share like your own journey, but can you tell us a bit about your mental health journey then?
Yeah, it's been a long time coming, really. So it's funny because every time I kind of tell the story, it evolves all the time, because I'm still kind of learning, and I'm still changing, and you know, I nearly discover another condition every week, but I'm not adding any more. I'm not adding any more to the list at this stage. But like when I think back, it kind of started in my early teens. I started having like severe anxiety, and you know, and being self-conscious, and being very body aware, and being very, very aware of myself, and that it would have been in my early teens. And I ended up going for therapy for depression in my early 20s, and then I went for therapy for anxiety in my 30s, and all for different reasons. And then like I'm 41 now, so I was 40. So I was, you know, when I wrote my first blog, and that was really just, the blog was called The Endless Spiral, but the subheading was how I use sport as an escapism. And all it really was like me sitting there thinking, well, I know I'm living with anxiety, so I would watch sports kind of to take my mind away from, you know, the negative thoughts and stuff. And that's what the first blog was. And then obviously here we are today. It all changed. Do you know what I mean? I went from sport, then I went to body dysmorphia, which I discovered, didn't even know the term existed. Then it was binge eating disorder. Again, it's a term I'd never heard before. And now I seem to be kind of an ambassador nearly for men's mental health, and, you know, and men in general, which it was never my intention. I mean, I have everyone on the podcast, but when I get asked to do a lot of stuff, it's usually to do with men's stuff like body image and body positivity and stuff like that. So yeah, so it's a long story, but I've tried to keep it short, but there's like a lot in there.
Yeah. No, like it's so interesting, and I think it's really cool how you say, you know, like there are things that you didn't even realize, like body dysmorphia and things that you had, and you know, like that's it's probably a good thing now that you've discovered it, but it just shows maybe, how far we've came whenever you started in your teens, and now you've got to this point, and it's only at this point in your 40s that you've maybe came across the right terminology and things. So it maybe just shows, thankfully we're having more conversations and we're becoming more mental health aware, but maybe not as far as we need to be. So
exactly.
You had said there about, you've had loads of people on the podcast, and you're happy for people to come on and share their stories. So like, how do you think like the podcast and podcast in general has helped with maybe people coming out and sharing their mental health stories more?
Well, it helped me personally massively, because I've had so many different guests on the podcast. Like, it's been very therapeutic for me to just get like tips and advice even from experts in the podcast. So like, I have different people, so like I'll try and mix it up. So I might have just somebody on to tell their story, or maybe the next week I'll have like an expert in a specific area. Like, for example, I've got Sabina Brennan coming up soon, who is all about the mind and the brain and how the brain works. Like, I'm doing a podcast tomorrow with Stephanie Preisner, and she's all about autism and stuff like that. So like, it's been very therapeutic for me and enlightening, and so educational as well, because I like, when I started the podcast, so the blog started first, and then what happened was some people maybe didn't want to write a blog. So I was like, well, maybe I can interview them on the podcast if they're not comfortable doing a blog. It's just a different type of content that they might be comfortable doing. And that's what the blog was really. So like, when I started doing, that's when the podcast, when I started doing the podcast again, like I said, I wasn't sharing my story at all. It was more just to give other people a platform. But then I was kind of thinking, well, if I'm asking other people to share their stories, then maybe I should be doing the same myself. And I wasn't purposely not sharing it. I suppose a typical guy, you feel there's a stigma, and, you just don't want to talk about it. And I suppose I was just in denial. And then somebody said to me, because they picked up on stuff that I was saying, and somebody picked up about kind of the body dysmorphia, and I looked it up. And once I looked that term up, I was like, Jesus, like a light bulb went off. My world changed overnight. So the podcast has been massive for me, massively therapeutic. And luckily, I'm thankful I've got so many comments from different people saying that they've got something from it as well, which is great. And like I always said, that if only one person listens to it, I'm happy. I mean, if only one person gets something from it, I'm happy. And thankfully, like, it's a lot of people have got something from it, so hopefully it's helping people.
100%. I think as well, from like what you were saying, is that like mental health is one of those things that's such on like a spectrum. It just it changes, and you're getting new terminology as the years go on. And I think what me and Rosie, like, one thing I've learned from doing Mind Your Mood and being on this placement is that I think my screen's frozen, but I'm still talking. I just look like I'm really interested at that angle, but I am 100%. But what we've learned is a lot about self-care. And before I started, I was like, okay, so what is self-care? Doing a face mask or once a week, or is having a cup of tea? But then we started talking about it and branching out about it a lot more. And I'm more into like the likes of yoga and going to the gym and sea swims, because I find they're very grounding. And you're speaking to a lot of students who've been like, no, I actively go out there and go swimming in the sea because it really, really helps ground me. And I just want to know as well, is there anything, because you were saying about sport, but is there anything else that you find from doing the podcast that you think is more of a self-care routine that you wouldn't have done before?
Yoga is one. I had Neve Verbinski, she'll kill me if I can't remember her name, and she was on the podcast a few times, and she was kind of, the first episode was kind of developing a healthy relationship with food, and then the other one was developing a healthy relationship with, well, she hates when I call it exercise, movement. And you just mentioned yoga, and that was one thing that I'd never done before, was yoga. And I started doing it, and it's been amazing, because I've always said, like, I'm brutal at meditation and mindfulness and stuff like that. Like, I'm especially meditation, and I used to always think that meditation and mindfulness were the same thing. Again, I was kind of was educated that they're not the same thing. They can be for some people, but for other people, they're not. So I've kind of, and that was pretty big for me as well, because I used to get really obsessed with exercise and stuff. And now even I'll try yoga now, and it's like, it's just takes a huge weight off your shoulders to say, I'll just go do yoga for 10, 15 minutes. And I'm doing it for different reasons now. So I'm not doing it to affect how I look. I'm doing it to affect how I feel, which has been massive for me. So it's been mainly my thought process that's changed. And then from the thought process has come my actions, if you know what I mean. Because whatever I was doing before, I was doing it for the wrong reasons. And when you're doing things for the wrong reasons, they're not sustainable, and you'll never stick to them, and well, for me anyway, I'll always crash. I put too much pressure on myself all the time. So now the fact that I can give myself a break, I'm in a much better place, a much better headspace, and my thought process has changed. So I have a much better relationship with food now as well. Now, look, I'm not perfect, and I'll never be perfect, and no one ever will. But I've made huge ground from 12 months ago to now. And that's all anyone can ask. Like, I wrote a blog on you recently, and I even said it at the end of it. It's like, it's not a race. Because people would say to me, oh, you've done more in 12 months than someone doing 5 years. And I'm like, who cares? Doesn't matter. Like, it could take you 10 years, but if you're going in the right direction, that's all you can really ask for anyone. And that's all I'm asking of myself. Like I injured my back there for a while, and then that got better, and I injured my neck. And I wasn't able to do much. Where before I'd be absolutely cracking up with that, because I'd be like, oh God, like, oh, if I can't work out, and then I'm going to look crap, and then my mind would go, and all this type of stuff, and the endless spiral, my mind would go into this endless spiral, which is obviously where the name came from, where that doesn't happen anymore, which is amazing. Look, it might happen every now and again, but I've been able to pick up kind of tools and tips and tricks along the way where I'm able to adjust that now. And if I have a bad day, now I'll just embrace it, which is amazing. Where before I would try and fight it. So if I was having a really bad day, I would feel worse about myself. And it would be physically exhausting, and it would be mentally exhausting, and it would be emotionally exhausting. And you'd end up in bed for 2 days after it, because you're just knackered from it. Where now, because of, like I said, I've changed my thought process, I've got so much more energy after it, where I can actually, I could just embrace it. So my batteries don't get completely drained. And then I'm in bit, because if I'm not good to myself, I'm not good to anyone else around me either. So that's been quite massive for me, as my thought process has changed.
Yeah, and now you've just said about, like people around you and things. So you obviously started out by saying like your struggles have kind of started like in your early teens, and obviously now you're into your 40s. So, have you had like a good support system, or did you find, it really hard at the start to maybe let people around you know that you were struggling? Or
nobody knew. I had no support structure around me, because the reason why was because I told nobody. Like, it was self-inflicted. I told nobody. And like so my early teens, so if you're not familiar with my story, in my early teens I started to go to life-saving classes in the local swimming pool, and I went for them from probably around 13 or so up onto my late teens. And from that period, the damage was done when I finished at 17 or 18. Internally for me, the damage was done. I was a wreck, because I was not comfortable in my own skin. I was comparing myself too much to people. There's so many parts about myself I didn't like. And like, I suppose I always I never really thought about it much. Like I said, when I went for the therapy in my early 20s for depression, I didn't link it to anything like that. It was all about kind of family stuff and school and all that type of stuff. Never once mentioned anything about, my body or anything, or my dislike for myself. Never really said it to anyone really. But I would sit there on a daily basis, and I would list all the things that I didn't like about myself. I didn't like my hairline. I didn't like my ears. I didn't like my chin. I didn't like I go from the top to the bottom. I would list everything I didn't like about myself. Didn't like my teeth. Didn't like my calves. Didn't like my stomach. Didn't like, you name it. I didn't like it about myself. And when you tell yourself these things over and over and over again, you eventually believe it. And when you're not sharing anything with anyone, you don't have another you don't have another voice, you don't have another opinion, you know, to either tell you to, you know, that you're wrong or whatever. You've only got the voice in your head. So you're listening to your own negative thoughts all the time. And it just wears you down, and it wore me down. Like in my 20s, I had suicidal thoughts daily, weekly. I would, because, you know, because just constantly down. And I didn't want to do anything. I stopped hanging around with friends. I lost relationships. I just didn't want to do anything, you know. And it's terrible, like, and it's awful. And when you look back now at it, I'm like, I pretty much have written off my teens, my 20s, and my 30s are just a write off from me, because I don't find anything positive in them at all. I'm sure there is, but I've blocked it out, which is a shame as well. Yeah, I know when I went for a therapy in my 30s for anxiety, it was all about because I was changing careers and I just wasn't dealing with things. And again, it was just everything that was just built up inside me. But again, I was dealing with, or linking it to work and all that type of stuff. But look, I had so many skeletons in my closet and everything swept under the rug that I hadn't dealt with anything in so long. I was like a volcano ready to erupt, and I didn't know why, you know, and I didn't want to deal with it, which is probably the main reason. I was just in denial. Like, I knew I didn't like myself. Obviously, I didn't know there's a term for it. I just felt that that's how I felt, and just didn't like myself. And then the comfort, or to like, I was be comfort eating, and I was binge eating all the time. You know, to make myself feel better, because I'd go to the gym and I'd be feeling so anxious going to the gym and self-conscious. I couldn't do anything in the gym. So I'd leave, and then I'd feel worse about myself. And then I'd go home, binge eat, and then you'd want to purge it all up. And the spiral would start all over again. And this went on for a long, long time, you know. And then obviously we were working from home. And like, I got in shape a few times, but like I said, and I hate saying that, in shape, because it's all personal. It's all how, you know, how you perceive yourself. But I've probably twice in my life I've been content-ish with how I looked. 3 times. Now is the 3rd time. 2 times back in the day, you know, where I was kind of happy, but I crashed and burnt, and, you know, I fell off the wagon, and everything just went back again because you didn't deal with anything, you know. And then all of a sudden, like I said, I was working from home. The pandemic had hit. Sitting at the desk one day, and I just decided, well, you know what, I'll write a blog. And then all of a sudden, just the floodgates open, you know, and here we are.
Yeah. I know, like you've already said about, you know, how great the podcast has been for you. And obviously, you know, you've mentioned a few people that you've had on and things, but is there any like key highlights that you've taken away from it, just in the podcast, or like personally, like in your career?
The main highlights for me from the podcast isn't actually merely the podcast itself. It's the relationships and the connections I've built from doing the podcast. That's what I've taken from it. So I've got so many people now, you know, contacts on my phone or on social media or whatever. If I'm struggling, or if I'm stuck on anything, they're there. And if I need anything from them, or if they need anything from me, you know. So I know social media gets like a bad name, but I have found, like, in the community on Instagram, amazing, from, you know, from people offering, you know, doing videos there all the time, offering advice, and, you know, intuitive eating, which I haven't even mentioned that yet, intuitive eating, therapists, whatever, so many people. So that's what I've got from the podcast. It's more being the relationships and the connections I've made from it, you know.
Yeah. And you'd say, you know, you have a mixture of, you know, people just on telling their stories, and then like educational people. I know, like Ross and I would find from like reviewing our Instagram and things, that we would get maybe more connection with people whenever we share more educational posts. Would you find that there's any difference in terms of feedback and ratings and things between the two?
Yeah, the episodes where people tell their stories don't get as much listens as the educational ones. Yeah, that's nearly 2 to 1. It's like I get loads and loads more people. So I had Joe Mascalo on recently, just because it's in my head, and she was talking about binge eating disorder, because I wanted to cover that. Where the next week I had someone telling their story. I can't remember who it was, and the not the reviews, but the kind of the listens and all that were through the roof for the the experts telling their giving their advice now. Because obviously, I don't know, I've been trying to think about it. I suppose maybe people, if they're tuning into a podcast, I suppose they want to be educated. Maybe they don't want to listen to people telling their stories. But look, to me, I don't care, because it's not about that for me. Like, I want someone to be comfortable coming on the podcast and be able to share and tell their story, and not care that, well, God, if if I'm not an expert, so maybe they won't get as many ratings. I don't share my statistics with anyone. I don't tell anyone, because to me, it's not relevant. What's relevant to me is how the person feels and what they get from being able to share their story. That's what's important to me about it.
Just on that as well. Sorry, I keep going in and out of mute because my housemates are just home and they're yelling at the dogs to get off the bed, and I don't want you all to hear and be like, what is going on? Like, what's going on in that house? And I'm like, this is me on the bed. But what I was going to say is as well, so we found Keith through, because it was one day, it was really late on the day and Rosie was off, and Rosie normally does the Instagram. So I was like, I completely forgot about it. I was like, oh, I was going to put something up. What was that? And then I was looking for like quotes from stories from athletes, sorry, and I was looking for some of them and I couldn't find any ones that were all consistent, and I found yours, which are all consistent, great font, and I really liked them. So then I popped up to you and was like, can I borrow these? And you're like, yeah, make sure tag it, whatever. So what I would kind of wonder is, do you follow anyone specifically for you or for the podcast that would kind of like give you inspiration for the podcast, or even for your own sort of self-care and identifying what's going on in your mind?
Yes and no. So no, I don't, because I don't follow any influencers, because I'm my own influencer. And I know that sounds cheesy and corny, but it's true. I don't follow any big accounts. So for me, like how am I going to put this? So like, all the accounts I follow are just, people with a story to tell, or something that helps me or benefits me, and they're my influencers. So they're not famous, or at least some of them aren't, or most of them aren't. So someone just being brave enough to come on and tell their story, in their stories or something, that's, for me, is what I will use. There's the dogs going. See, even the dogs agree with me. But yeah, so I don't really follow any large accounts for any particular reason, other than I just don't see the benefit of it. Like, I did a webinar before, and it was all about social media, and that's what I was trying to say in the talk, was that, like, use the social media for your own benefit, and get rid of all the crap that's not benefiting you. Don't follow people because you feel you should. Like, there's filters and mute buttons, everything. Like, I completely cleared it out to just follow people that actual, soon you're scrolling through, you actually get a good feeling from it, or you get motivated or inspired, or whatever it is. So yeah, like, there could be someone with 10 followers, and I will love their stuff because they're honest, and they're real, really. If that answers your question.
No, 100%, because we would sort of go through, if we would get recommended on the Mind Your Mood Instagram, like a couple of little small accounts, and I always find that the smaller accounts of like the more consistent things are a little bit more appealing.
Yeah.
One sort of things like that. So no, 100%, because I was just thought I would ask that while Rosie was on the topic, because I came across the stuff that you put and I was like, this is really consistent the whole way through, and I really liked it, whereas all the other ones were a bit all over.
The reason why they're consistent is I'm also a graphic designer and a marketing and creative manager as well. So all of that stuff is what I do as well. So all my stuff will always be like that anyway. So
great.
Yeah.
No, I really seen it that day and I was like, can I have this, please? And you really
I've done some new ones. If you want more, they're up on the website.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
And then Keith, just in terms of, I know you've thrown out a few different terms that you've already said, yourself, you weren't overly familiar with until maybe you started doing the podcast and things. But for everyone joining, would you be able just to maybe give a brief overview of what they are, like body dysmorphia and binge eating and things, just to give everyone maybe a clear indication of what it is we're actually discussing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I probably should have said that. So body dysmorphia, or its kind of technical term is body dysmorphic disorder, is a condition. It's a mental health condition It's kind of in the anxiety family, but it's closely related to eating disorders. But what it is, it's a condition where you are constantly worried about flaws that you think you have, which are usually not visible to other people. And they can control your life, they can control your emotions, they can control your thoughts. And it's kind of how it's all like you're constantly worried about how other people will perceive you. Like, I'm just trying to paraphrase it here just to kind of put it in layman's terms. So for me, like I said, I was constantly worried about certain features and all that type of stuff. So there's two kind of types of body dysmorphia. There's one where it can affect your weight or can affect your shape. So in other words, you might not like the shape of your nose or your ears or whatever. And then the other one is where you're constantly worried about your weight. And then there's another one, which I only discovered this about a week ago. And then someone contacted me today about it. Was muscle dysmorphia, which is just another kind of branch of body dysmorphia, where you're trying to bulk up and you're constantly worried about muscles and all that type of stuff. Yeah, so that's another version of it. Binge eating disorder is kind of, it is what it says on the tin. It's just binge eating. You know, it's one of the lesser known eating disorders and probably doesn't get mentioned enough. And I've had like Bodywise on my website, and they were talking about this, and I've kind of looked up this a fair amount since I kind of learned the term, and it's hugely common, but it usually goes undiagnosed for a long time, especially in men, which I'm the perfect example of it. Like, there's so much stigma when it comes to men with these topics that usually men just don't share and don't talk about. But yeah, so binge eating is just like, you know, just constantly binging on food and then wanting to purge it all up again. And it's an emotional thing, you know.
Yeah. And you've talked about meals quite a few times. I know you said at the start, like, you know, you are quite big on male mental health, and you know, Ross and I, like I said before, you know, we can obviously see our own Instagram insights and things. And you know, we know that like suicide rates, say, would be like 75% male, 25% female. But what we found was our following was exactly the opposite of that. So we only had 25% male following. And so we ourselves decided, you know, that we would like to try and branch out to males more. And we like launched the Movember campaign, and we like collaborated with them and things. But is there any advice you would give to male students, maybe, who, like you said, you know, there is quite a big stigma surrounding mental health in general, but especially male mental health?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it depends on. I mean, like, everyone's different, aren't they? And everyone's social circle is different. Everyone's backgrounds are different, and like, you have to take every case individually. But like, what I would say is that don't live in your own head. Like, we were talking about journaling there a while ago. Like, for me, even, I never journaled, and I had everything in my own head. And as I said earlier on, you've only got your own thoughts to deal with, and they're usually not going to be positive. You know, it's just get out of your own head and don't self-stigmatize, because what I have found, and speaking to so many people, is you think that people will judge you, or if you say something, or your support circle around you. And everyone I've spoken to have all said the same thing. I'm the same. You think this, you think that, and then you share, and you're inundated with support and help and advice. You know, so just like, and get help. You know, I know that certain universities are great for, you know, counseling and stuff like that. Is go see a therapist. Don't live in your own head, and don't self-stigmatize. You know, and look. And it doesn't matter what, like, as I said this only recently, it doesn't matter what age you are, what gender you are, what size you are, what shape. Well, it makes no difference. There's help for everyone, and there's light at the end of the tunnel for everybody. I mean, look at me, for God's sake. Like, how long was I in the, like, hiding in the shadows, and then I've come out of the shadows, and like, I've never felt better about myself. You know, so it doesn't matter what age you are. Like, and especially I'm saying that to men as well. It doesn't matter what age you are, whether you think, because when I started, you know, to share stuff, I was thinking, geez, like people were like, how you let this go for so long, or, you know what I mean, all that type of stuff. And I've had nothing of that except support from everyone, you know. So just like get out of your own head. It's the worst place to be, trust me.
I know, funny, that's what me and Ross talk about quite often. Like I would say, you could literally go up to someone on a bus and tell them that you were struggling and they would 100% want to help you. Like I
I
just
did that
don't.
to someone on a train. I was going to work one day and there was a girl upset on a train. And as soon as I saw her, I was like, oh, Jesus, because I'd been in that. I had a job before and I was nearly in tears every morning going in because I just wasn't in the right mindset. And I saw her and I just went over to her. And all I had to do was just ask her, are you okay? And that's all she wanted to hear. Are you okay? I don't even know her name. I've no idea who she is. I just asked her, was she okay? And that's all she wanted to hear. So like you'd be amazed, but just lending an ear to somebody. You don't like, don't judge them. Don't offer advice. Just ask them, are they okay? Because the funny thing is, if I had been asked that for a long time, and maybe I probably would have shared. I wanted to share for a long time. Just eventually I just wrote a blog. I sat on the blog for about 2 weeks, didn't know anything with it. And then eventually I posted it on Twitter. And the reason why I posted it on Twitter was because I didn't really know anyone personally on Twitter. Like I've a decent following on Twitter, but I don't really know anyone on it, if you know what I mean. So I felt safe and secure posting on Twitter and kind of testing the waters there. And I got a great reaction. And then I was able to, just kind of slowly step out of the shadows, kind of 1 foot at a time. But yeah, like you just don't self-stigmatize. It's crippling. It really is.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Like small steps is ideal just to like make any form of change. And obviously you'd say, you started going to therapy in your early 20s. So did you share that journey with anyone or did you go yourself, or like what made you want to take that first step?
So yeah, good question actually. So my parents sent me because they could see that I was struggling. But nothing was ever really said after it. I went for quite a long time and she was brilliant and she was great. And like the depression kind of eased a little bit from going and speaking to her. But yeah, I mean, my parents were obviously able to pick up on I just wasn't right. I wasn't happy. I was probably, I can't really remember, like you block half of the negative stuff out. I was probably just upset and just down all the time and I wasn't telling anyone why. And so, yeah, no, my parents sent me,
And did you find that they were then supportive throughout the process of, you going to therapy and things, or did you even, like Ross and I do a course called Look After Your Mate, and what we find from like the stats in it is that like 75% of students who have a mental health difficulty will disclose it to a friend as opposed to someone in a position of authority or even a family member. So would you have found that you shared it among friends, or was it maybe just family?
No, like literally nobody. I didn't even speak to like we're not really a close family anyway. My parents were separated at that stage anyway. So maybe one of them would drop me and then one of them would hang around and bring me back, and like we'd barely speak in the car anyway. But no, I told nobody, absolutely nobody. So like I just wore this mask all the time of like the I'm fine mask, I call it, because when I started sharing my story last year, like nobody could believe it. And they're like, but geez, kid, like, you never said anything, or you looked fine. And this is the thing, because I look perfectly normal and fine, no one ever had a clue I had a problem, because I don't look like I had a problem. I don't fit the stereotypical image of someone who with an eating disorder or someone with body image issues. Like I suppose, well, at least that's what everyone has told me. I don't look like I ever had a problem and don't have a problem. So that didn't help as well, because obviously if no one ever comments to you about it, you don't really have to deal with it. Like it was never brought up in conversation or anything. I just lived in my own head for a long, long time. So I told nobody.
I think as well, like even not even having like a full journal, but even being able to write down your notes and stuff as well, just little things that are going on in your brain that day is just really a lot better to look back on and be like, this is what I was thinking at this time, but now I'm thinking this. And I think as well for me and Rosie, doing the last couple of months within Mind Your Mood, that we've seen that like from this time last year, where you could get within Ulster, within student wellbeing, get counselling within a couple of days, but then now it's went up because of everything that's going on with, I'm not sure if COVID or over referral numbers, but there's went for a 4 to 6 week kind of waiting list for people. So people are kind of having to sit there and wait. Do you think there's been much of a difference in whenever you went into your 20s looking at like sorts of help and like things you can get outside of like from now to like, do you think that's changed, or the waiting time of anything's changed? Is it any easier, or?
Of course, the waiting times are colossal at the moment. I mean, I was lucky that my parents sent me, and then in my 30s when I went for therapy for anxiety, I paid for it myself. And then when I had a bit of a breakdown, and even this time around when I tried to go into my GP, I wanted to go to, because he said CBT is great for body dysmorphia, you know, just to change your thought process. And then I wanted to see a nutritionist, and the waitings were, like I was told, like the waiting list could be like 2 years. And I'm like, oh, what do you do for 2 years? Like, it's pointless. And anyone else I've spoken to have all had to pay privately, and I can't afford to do it privately because I'm at the stage in my life now where I have kids and I have responsibilities, no mortgage. You just don't have it. At least I don't anyway. I wish I did. So you're kind of left in limbo unless you can pay for it yourself. So yeah, it's terrible. I mean, the stories I've been told that I haven't shared with anyone, and they're not on the blogs and they're not on the podcast, and people have just shared to me privately because they don't want to be mentioned. It's just horrific, especially the eating disorder ones. You know, I'm like, Jesus Christ, like, it's absolutely horrific. So that's what I was saying to you earlier on about the community I found on Instagram, because it's nearly self-help, you know, until you get to see somebody. So you're like, you could be on a list, as I said, for like 2 years or whatever it is, 6-9 months for the CBT. You know, like, you just have to try and do your best. But it can be very overwhelming as well when you hear that and you think, like, what do you do? Like, especially if you don't talk to anybody, you know, it can be very overwhelming.
No, 100%. I think
Yeah.
because I was speaking to someone from the south as well, and I mentioned that up here, like, it's the waiting times are, from what it looks like, are a bit worse than what it are if you're in university, because it's all like an institution sort of thing. But
Yeah.
I told them that it was also free up here, and they were completely blown out. They were like, free? I'm like, yeah, like, it's just a norm to us being from up here. But obviously it's like weird to see what other people like in other parts of the world as well, and what it sort of be like from the likes of like America, where everything's sort of privatized over there and they seem to get things so fast and easy, whereas other places in the world have it a lot worse. So it's just nice to know as well what it's like in other situations.
But it's free for us as well if you're on, you know, if you go public. But like, that's what I'm saying, just the list is so long
Really
that
not.
if you want to wait, that's fine. But if you can't wait, which most people can't, and you have to pay for it yourself, and it can be expensive. So like, if you have to pay for a therapist, and then you want to pay for a nutritional therapist, like, how are you going to afford them? So I mean, I'm still going to see my therapist privately, but it's not regularly, and it's when I can, you know, and that's all I can do at the moment. Now, I've been lucky where, you know, I've had so many experts on the podcast where I always joke with them. I said, I don't really want to do the podcast. I'm only using the hour for free therapy. I'm only joking, but I nearly have been. Do you know what I mean? Because that's just the way it is, you know, unfortunately.
No, I know.
Yeah. And not everyone's is in that position. You know, like I always say to people, like, you know, you should share your story. I'm not telling everyone to go out and start a podcast and write blogs, but if you know, try and find somebody who you can speak to.
I think we were kind of like that a lot whenever I was in my teens and like later teens. We like Tumblr was a big thing. It's not anymore, but like you would always come across like anonymous Tumblr blogs and people just talking about their story and talking to people that understand it. So completely understand. I think social media has been a good way in that way, that you can be anonymous and be whoever you want to be.
Yeah. Well, now I'm lucky in a way where, like, I grew up in the 80s and I had an Etch-a-Sketch and a Commodore. I didn't have social media when I grew up. not even in the 90s. And I'm kind of glad of that in a way. Obviously, I have a great community now where I can share with, so that I missed out on that. But I'm glad I missed out on the other stuff. And we all know what I'm talking about when it comes to social media. You know, it can be detrimental for your mental health, you know, because you're constantly these images are constantly in your head and or not in your face all the time, you know. And it's easy to see and go, oh well, you know, don't be comparing yourself to everyone else. You still do it. We all do it, you know. It's just kind of in moderation, where I didn't have that at all. Now, I just liked myself so much. I don't think it wouldn't have made a difference to me anyway. You know, even if I saw something or if anyone said that to me, I wouldn't have believed them. So, you know, it's hard to know. But yeah, I mean, social media, I'm glad I didn't have social media when I was a kid, I think.
Yeah, and you said about having like such a great support network online, but have you found since maybe coming out and sharing your story more that like your support network among friends has got different? Or, you know, like were you afraid, maybe you said like doing it on Twitter, no one really knew you, but did you find then once people had heard your story who were closer to you, like did you find there was a difference in relationships, or was everyone just really supportive?
No, everyone was really supportive. The first time all my friends, I don't even know if my friends, well, see, like I said, the first few blogs from me, it wouldn't really given much away anyway. I gave a little bit away, but and then when I started, like I said, when I started doing the pod, and then well, see, it wasn't just my blog, right? So the Endless Spiral website is more a blogging platform. So I've got lots of blogs up there from different people. So it wasn't all mine. It was only like a couple of mine at the beginning. And then when I did the podcast, like I said, I wasn't sharing anything. So even when I started the Endless Spiral, no one really would have known anything. The first time I think everyone read everything or heard my story was I did an exclusive in the Irish Independent, which in a way, I mean, you can kind of look back and go like, Jesus Christ, that's some way to tell everyone. But for me, I was happy to do that because I didn't want to have to go around telling every single person my story and having, you know, I was happy to just put it out there and just let everyone else read it for themselves, and make their own judgments from it then. Because I was like, I didn't want to just do it with anyone. So I was happy with who did it, and I was happy with the platform or the medium that was being done, if you know what I mean. So I was happy with it, and I knew that it would be quite good, and it was quite a big piece as well. And then of course, as soon as it went out, everyone, like my friends that I'd even had drifted away from for a long time, which is my fault. I know you get older, you drift apart, but I had purposely done it. All started messing me. Geez, like, do you want to do this, and we'll do this and do that and that? And I was like, Jesus Christ, like, I mean, you know, I was nearly in tears just reading half the messages from people. So it was amazing. Like, yeah, probably not the way everyone would choose to eventually share their story, but I'm glad I did it like that, you know.
Yeah, and you obviously had said that you had like such an outpouring of, you know, support and things. Did it make you regret not sharing your story sooner?
Yeah, of course it did. Like, I mean, like I said, I was silent for 20 odd years. Yeah, of course it did. But sure, look, there's no point me looking back and having more regrets, and I can't go back. Like, I can't change anything. So, like, I can only do the best I can now. And because I have a lot of regrets, obviously, because I hid myself away for a long time, and I have a lot of regrets, and they took a long time to try and figure out as well. But yeah, look, they're gone now. I mean, there's nothing I can do about them, and all I can be is the best version of myself now, you know. And that's what I was saying to you about the social media. I don't want to be like, I don't follow any big accounts because I don't want to be another version of someone else. I want to be the best version of me, and that's all I can hope for. And as long as I'm doing that, and I'm honest, and I'm authentic, and, you know, I'm helping people, then I'm happy, really.
Yeah, and I think through the podcast and the blog, you know, you're really doing that. I'm just conscious of time, so I just want to see if anyone has any questions they want to ask Keith.
I haven't really got another question, but just another comment. So you were saying about yoga. Have you tried hot yoga yet?
No, the Neve Verbinski, which I was talking about earlier, the nutritional therapist, she does it, and she did recommend it to me.
Mm-hmm.
But when she recommended it to me, I was kind of early on in, you know, my self-discovery and self-help and all that type of stuff. And I was too self-conscious. I wasn't going into a class to do yoga at that stage. I wasn't ready for it. So I will probably look into it at some stage, because she said it was amazing. She also said I should probably, you know, do some beginner classes first before I do that, because
Yeah.
she said it can be quite tough as well.
Yeah,
So,
I
yeah.
started doing yoga in the first lockdown because my friends always did it before lockdown, and they were just like, yeah, like come with us, like we're all gonna go to like, this class together. And I was like, I don't think I can with you. Like I just can't just think about all the people I couldn't do it. So I started doing it, and like lockdown, got a bit better at it and started going to classes. But we started going to hot yoga. First class we went to was one of the more advanced classes, but we didn't know. We were just kind of like, because they all say beginner friendly, but they don't mean that. And like we went in, I was a bit hungover. My friend was like, I don't know where she was at before, but she was at some sort of family dinner thing, and we both got there, and there was people like balancing their legs in the air and all like holding on. And I looked over to my friend, she was like starfished on the ground just like this. It is really intense. So make sure you ask, please, what class would you go for a beginner? But 100% recommend it, because it's so warm and it kind of forces you to like make sure you're breathing and like, you know, staying in focus, because you were saying about, you know, meditation and stuff can kind of be a wee bit tricky for you, so you need to.
Well, I've had loads of offers from people even who teach classes, you know, to come along, or to, you know, to do the online version now, and I keep saying no to all of them because I'm not. Well, first of all, I injured my back. At least I'm using that excuse anyway. But so I'll probably do it eventually. But yeah, I'm sticking to the hot workouts for now.
You'll need to let me know how you get on when you do.
Yeah, you'll probably find me in an ambulance somewhere.
Any questions?
Yeah. Hi Keith. Thanks very much. I just kind of be interested in the nutritional therapy point of view, just kind of like what that involved and what you kind of got from that from a mental health point of view.
Yeah. So basically it was more about your thought process and your relationship with food, rather than dealing with the actual food part itself. And he introduced me to intuitive eating as well, which is basically just listening to your body and knowing when you're full, when you're, you know, and when you're hungry, when you're full, and it's to try and stop the binge eating. So it was more, you know, I haven't gone loads of times, unfortunately, and I will, but it was more just to change my thought process and develop a healthy relationship with food. And as I said earlier on, once I was able to develop a healthy relationship with myself, I can have a healthy relationship with everything else, which included food. So for a mental health thing, it was just more just to change your thought process around food. And again, the food was for me was a byproduct of the rest of the stuff. It was a comfort thing, you know. So I needed to basically learn to kind of just accept myself more, you know, and then the food kind of comes along with it. And then the exercise and the food, like it's more of a holistic type of thing. It's not just one thing. And then like Neve is the new nutritional therapist, and that's what she was saying, to do the yoga and then just give yourself a break. And then when you give yourself a break, you're not putting pressure on yourself. And so it can be, it's not just one specific thing. But for me, it was just changing my thought process was just massive, you know.
Oh, that's really interesting. Thanks very much.
Yeah. The intuitive eating is brilliant. Like, I don't know if anyone's familiar with it, but basically, well, not basically, but it's you're not eliminating any foods from your diet. So there's no such thing as a bad or a good food. There's not calorie counting. And eventually, over time, you know what you want to eat. So you're listening to your body. I know it's about to be massive for me as well. You know, just to stop the snacking on stuff that you just don't need. You know, that's been massive for me. So if you want to go on, I don't know if you probably follow them with Intuitive Eating Ireland on Instagram, and you've got Sinead and her sister Gillian, and I actually had Gillian on the podcast, and they're amazing, and they've got everything up there. They're really, really good. You know.
Great. Do we have any other questions just before we round up? No. Okay, well, we just want to quickly end by saying congratulations to Keith for being nominated for Podcaster and Blogger of the Year, and his voting, I think, opens at the end of April, does it?
End of April, yeah. I have another nomination as well. I'm not supposed to say, but I've that's not coming until July, but I've been told already. So same one I was nominated for last year. So it's the People's Choice Awards. I got nominated last year, and I've apparently got another nomination this year, but that's not till July. So I mean, I can share it. I just can't. There's no voting, or there's nothing up yet, but yeah, so that's coming up as well.
Amazing. No problem. So yeah, if we don't have any other questions, I think that's us maybe finished up. We just